The dust rose in plumes around Natalie Peterson's worn leather boots as she stepped off the train onto the wooden platform of Las Animas, Colorado. Her single carpetbag clutched in trembling hands, and her heart hammering with the terrifying realization that she had nowhere to go and no one waiting for her arrival. The year was 1882, and the frontier town sprawled before her like something from a half-remembered dream. All weathered wood and sun-bleached paint, with horses tied to hitching posts and men in wide-brimmed hats moving with purpose through streets still muddy from yesterday's rain. She stood frozen as other passengers pushed past, reuniting with loved ones or striding confidently toward destinations they knew, while she remained rooted to that spot, 22 years old and more alone than she had ever been in her entire life. The telegram had been clear. Her aunt in Denver was dead, succumbed to fever 3 weeks before Natalie had sold everything she owned in Philadelphia to make the journey west. The lawyer's message had reached her in Kansas City, but by then, she had already spent most of her money on the train ticket and had barely enough for meals along the way. She had gotten off here in Las Animas because her funds had run out, simple as that, and now she stood on this platform watching the sun sink lower toward the mountains, wondering what on earth she was supposed to do next. "Miss, you all right there?" The voice came from her left, deep and gentle, with a warmth that cut through the cold fear wrapping around her chest. She turned to find a man watching her with concern creasing his sun-tanned face. He was tall, lean in the way of men who spent their days working hard, with dark hair that curled slightly at the edges beneath his hat, and eyes the color of summer grass. He held his hat in his hands now, having removed it in a gesture of respect, and something in his expression told her he genuinely cared about the answer to his question. "I'm fine, thank you," she said automatically, the lie catching in her throat. He studied her for a long moment, those green eyes taking in her threadbare traveling dress, the single bag, the way she stood as if the ground might open up and swallow her whole. "Forgive me for being forward, but you don't look fine. You look like someone who just got some bad news and doesn't know which way to turn." The accuracy of his observation broke something inside her, and to her absolute horror, tears began to spill down her cheeks. She turned away quickly, swiping at them with her gloved hand, mortified to be crying in front of a complete stranger in the middle of a train platform in a town where she knew no one. "I'm sorry," she managed. "I shouldn't be falling apart like this. I'll be on my way." "Where exactly are you heading?" he asked quietly, stepping closer but not so close as to be improper. She couldn't answer. She had no answer to give. He seemed to understand without words. "My name is Yates Ormond. I run a ranch about 5 miles outside of town. My sister lives there with me, and she's always saying the place needs a woman's proper touch beyond what she can manage alone. We could use help with cooking, mending, that sort of thing. Room and board plus fair wages, if you're looking for work, that is." Natalie turned back to him, searching his face for any sign of ulterior motives or dishonesty. She had been warned about men who preyed on desperate women traveling alone, but something in his steady gaze and the earnest set of his shoulders made her instincts say he was genuine. "I don't know you," she said carefully. "No, you don't. And I'm not asking you to trust blindly. Come into town with me. I need to pick up supplies at the general store. The owner, Mrs. Henderson, has known me since I was knee-high to a grasshopper. You can ask her about my character. My sister, too. She's at the boarding house right now visiting a friend. You can meet her, see if you'd be comfortable working for us. If not, well, at least you'll have had time to figure out your next step." It was the most reasonable offer anyone had made her in weeks. Natalie drew in a shaky breath and nodded. "All right, thank you, Mr. Ormond." Just Yates is fine. He reached for her carpetbag and she let him take it, too exhausted to protest. And you are Natalie Peterson. Well, Miss Peterson, you belong here with me for the moment. Let's get you sorted out. Those words, simple as they were, settled something in her chest. She followed him off the platform and onto the main street of Las Animas, taking in the town properly now. There was a saloon with music already drifting from its doors despite the early hour, a bank that looked solidly built, a hotel with peeling paint on its sign, and a general store with bright red curtains in the windows. People nodded to Yates as they passed, and he returned the greetings with easy familiarity. The general store smelled of coffee and leather, and something sweet she couldn't quite place. A woman with silver hair and sharp eyes looked up from behind the counter, her face breaking into a smile when she saw Yates. "There's my favorite rancher," she said. "Come for those nails you ordered." "Yes, madam, and some other supplies." "But first, I was hoping you might speak with Miss Peterson here. She's new to town and considering working at the ranch. Thought you could vouch for whether I'm trustworthy or likely to cause trouble." Mrs. Henderson's gaze shifted to Natalie, and something softened in her expression. "Oh, honey, you look like you've had a rough time of it. Come here, let me see you properly." Natalie approached the counter, aware of Yates stepping back to give them space while still remaining in the store. "Yates Ormond is one of the good ones," Mrs. Henderson said quietly. "He and his sister Margaret have been running that ranch since their parents passed 4 years back. Works hard, pays his bills on time, never causes problems in town. Margaret is sweet as pie, though she's been poorly lately with her lungs, which is probably why they need extra help. If Yates is offering you work, he means it honestly and you'll be treated with respect." "Thank you," Natalie said, relief washing over her. "I appreciate your candor. Where are you from, dear?" "Philadelphia originally. I was coming to stay with my aunt in Denver, but she passed before I arrived." Mrs. Henderson clicked her tongue sympathetically. "The frontier can be hard that way. Sickness takes folks fast out here, but you're young and strong-looking. You'll make your way. And working for the Ormonds is a good start." They spoke for a few more minutes before Yates completed his purchases, loading supplies into a wagon waiting outside. True to his word, he then took her to the boarding house, a 2-story building with a porch that wrapped around the front. Inside, they found a young woman with Yates's same dark hair and green eyes, though hers were lighter, almost the color of new leaves. She was thin in a way that spoke of illness, with shadows under her eyes, but her smile was genuine when Yates introduced them. "Margaret, this is Miss Natalie Peterson. She just arrived in town and might be willing to help us out at the ranch. I wanted you two to meet before anything was decided." Margaret rose from her chair, moving slowly, and took Natalie's hands in hers. "Oh, I do hope you'll consider it. I've been trying to keep up with everything, but truthfully, I'm not as strong as I once was. Having another woman around would be such a blessing." There was no artifice in her words, no hidden agenda that Natalie could detect. These seemed to be genuinely good people offering her a lifeline when she desperately needed one. "I'll come," Natalie said. "Thank you both for the opportunity." The ride out to the ranch gave Natalie her first real look at Colorado's landscape. The plains stretched wide and golden in the late afternoon sun, with the Rocky Mountains rising in the distance like guardians watching over the land. Yates drove the wagon with practiced ease, pointing out landmarks along the way and explaining the ranch's operation. They ran cattle mostly, with some horses, and employed 2 ranch hands who lived in the bunkhouse. "It's not fancy," Yates warned as they approached, "but it's solid and weatherproof, and the views are something special." The ranch house was built of wood that had weathered to a soft gray, with a wide porch and windows that caught the last of the sunlight. Nearby stood a barn, a stable, and the smaller bunkhouse Yates had mentioned. Everything looked well maintained if worn, the mark of people who took pride in what they had even if it wasn't much. Margaret showed Natalie to a small bedroom off the kitchen, simply furnished with a bed, a dresser, and a washstand. "It's not much, but it's yours," she said. "And the view from that window in the morning is lovely." "It's perfect," Natalie said honestly. After the uncertainty of the past weeks, having any space to call her own felt like an incredible luxury. That evening, she helped Margaret prepare dinner while Yates tended to the horses. The two ranch hands, grizzled men named Pete and Samuel who had worked the land for 20 years, were polite but reserved at dinner, clearly waiting to see what sort of person this new addition to their household would be. Natalie kept quiet mostly, listening to their easy conversation about cattle prices and a fence that needed mending, feeling herself begin to relax for the first time since leaving Philadelphia. After dinner, she helped Margaret wash the dishes, and the other woman said quietly, "I'm glad you're here. I know Yates doesn't show it much, but he's been worried about me. This will ease his mind, having someone else to help shoulder the load." "He seems like a good brother," Natalie offered. "The best. He gave up a lot when our parents died. He was courting a girl in town, planning to marry, but she wanted to move east and he couldn't leave the ranch. Couldn't leave me. So he let her go, and he's been alone ever since. Well, except for me, Pete, and Samuel. Not much of a life for a man his age." Natalie wondered how old Yates was. Late 20s, perhaps. Certainly no more than 30. Young enough that giving up on love seemed like a tragedy. That first week passed in a blur of learning the rhythms of ranch life. Natalie rose before dawn to help prepare breakfast for everyone, learning what the men liked and how Margaret organized the kitchen. She took over most of the cooking, which Margaret accepted with grateful relief, and began tackling the mending that had piled up. The work was hard but satisfying in a way her life in Philadelphia had never been. There, she had lived with her mother until the older woman's death 6 months ago, working as a seamstress in a shop that paid barely enough to cover rent. Everything had been gray and close and suffocating. Here, even the work felt different, more purposeful somehow. Yates was unfailingly kind but kept a respectful distance. He thanked her for meals, complimented her cooking, and made sure she had everything she needed, but he never lingered or made her uncomfortable. She appreciated that, though she found herself watching him more than she probably should, noticing the way he moved with quiet confidence, the gentleness in his hands when he worked with the horses, the sound of his laughter when Pete told a bad joke over dinner. It was during the second week that things began to shift between them. Natalie had gone out to the barn to collect eggs from the chickens that roosted there, and she found Yates working on repairing a saddle, his hands moving with practiced skill as he threaded new leather through the worn stirrup. "You're good at that," she said, announcing her presence so she wouldn't startle him. He looked up with a smile. "Had a lot of practice. Out here you learn to fix things yourself or do without. How are you settling in?" "Well, I think everyone has been very welcoming." "Good, I'm glad." He set down his tools and stood, brushing dust from his pants. "I wanted to ask, actually. There's a dance in town this Saturday. Nothing fancy, just the community getting together. Margaret's not up for going, but I thought you might like it. Chance to meet people, see a bit more of Las Animas." "I'd be happy to escort you if you'd like." Natalie felt her heart skip in a way that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with the way Yates was looking at her, hopeful but not presumptuous. "I'd like that," she said. "Thank you." The smile that crossed his face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. Saturday arrived with clear skies and warm temperatures. Natalie wore her best dress, a deep blue cotton that brought out the color of her eyes, and Margaret helped her pin up her blonde hair in a style more elaborate than her usual simple bun. "You look beautiful," Margaret said. "Yates won't be able to take his eyes off you." "That's not what this is," Natalie protested, feeling her cheeks warm. "Oh, honey, I've seen the way you two look at each other when you think no one's watching. It's definitely what this is." The ride into town felt different with just the two of them in the wagon. Yates had changed into clean clothes, a dark shirt that made his eyes look even greener, and he kept stealing glances at her as he drove. "You do look lovely," he said quietly. "That color suits you." "Thank you. You look nice as well." They smiled at each other, and Natalie felt something warm unfurl in her chest, something she hadn't felt since before her mother's death. Hope, maybe, or the beginning of something deeper. The dance was held in the church hall, which had been decorated with wildflowers and lanterns. A fiddle player, a guitarist, and a man with a harmonica provided music that was lively and infectious. Yates introduced her to what felt like half the town, and everyone was friendly and curious about the new woman working at the Ormond ranch. When the dancing started, Yates offered his hand. "Fair warning, I'm better with horses than I am with dancing." But he was being modest. He led her through a reel with confidence, and then a waltz that had them moving closer together, his hand warm on her waist and her hand in his. They didn't talk much, just moved to the music, and Natalie found herself not wanting the song to end. Between dances, they took refreshments outside where it was cooler, standing on the church steps and looking up at the stars that blazed overhead with an intensity she had never seen in the city. "Can I tell you something?" Yates asked, his voice low and serious. "Of course. When I saw you on that platform looking so lost, something in me just knew. I can't explain it better than that. I knew I had to help you, that I couldn't just walk away. And every day since you came to the ranch, that feeling has just gotten stronger. I know it's only been 2 weeks, and I know you came here out of necessity, not choice, but I need you to know that I'm glad you're there. Really glad." Natalie's breath caught. "I'm glad too. When I stepped off that train, I thought my life was over. I thought I had made a terrible mistake coming west, that I should have somehow found a way to stay in Philadelphia. But now, I think maybe it was the best thing I could have done. Maybe I ended up exactly where I was supposed to be." "You belong here with me," Yates said softly, and then seemed to realize what he had said, pulling back slightly. "I mean here in Las Animas, at the ranch. Not that you belong to me, I didn't mean it like that." She reached out and touched his arm. "I know what you meant." They stood there for a long moment, the music drifting out from the hall behind them, the stars wheeling overhead, and something unspoken but powerful passing between them. The dance ended late, and they rode back to the ranch in comfortable silence, sitting close together on the wagon seat. When they arrived, Yates helped her down, his hands lingering on her waist a moment longer than necessary. "Thank you for tonight," she said. "I had a wonderful time. So did I. Maybe we could do it again sometime. I'd like that very much." She went inside feeling like she was floating and found Margaret still awake, reading by lamplight in her room. "From that look on your face, I'd say the evening went well," Margaret said with a knowing smile. "It did. Your brother is a good man, he is, and he deserves happiness. I think maybe you both do." Over the following weeks, Natalie and Yates grew closer in small, steady increments. He would find excuses to be in the kitchen when she was cooking, helping her reach high shelves or carrying in water from the pump. She would bring him coffee when he was working late in the barn, and they would talk about everything and nothing, sharing pieces of their pasts and dreams for their futures. He told her about growing up on the ranch, about his parents who had built it from nothing, about the responsibility he felt to keep it going. She told him about Philadelphia, about her mother's long illness and death, about how she had felt trapped in that life and how terrified she had been to leave it behind. "I'm glad you were brave enough to get on that train," he said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and crimson. "I'm glad you ended up here." "Me too," she said, and meant it with her whole heart. Margaret's health had improved with Natalie taking over most of the household work, and she made no secret of her approval of the growing affection between her brother and the new addition to their home. She would shoo them out of the kitchen after dinner, insisting she could handle the cleanup and they should go for a walk together. Those walks became Natalie's favorite part of each day. They would stroll around the ranch property, Yates pointing out the cattle and horses, talking about his plans to expand the operation, asking her opinions on things like whether to plant a vegetable garden near the house or where would be the best spot for a new chicken coop. He asked her opinions as if they mattered, as if she were a partner rather than just an employee, and she found herself thinking more and more about what it would mean to stay here permanently, to build a life in this place with this man. It was a month after the dance when everything changed. Natalie was in the garden she had started near the kitchen door, pulling weeds in the late afternoon sun, when she heard horses approaching at speed. She stood, shading her eyes, and saw 3 riders coming hard toward the ranch house. Yates emerged from the barn, and she could see tension in his shoulders even from a distance. The riders pulled up, and she recognized one of them as Sheriff Miller, whom she had met at the dance. "Yates, we've got trouble," the sheriff called. "Cattle rustlers hit the Morrison place last night, took near 50 head. We're forming a group to track them, and we need every able man, you willing, of course," Yates said without hesitation. "Let me saddle up." He started toward the stable, then turned and caught Natalie's eye. "I need to talk to you before I go, just for a minute." She followed him to the barn, her heart pounding with sudden fear. Cattle rustlers could be dangerous, violent men. The thought of Yates riding after them made her stomach clench with worry. "I don't know how long this will take," he said, pulling his saddle from its stand. "Could be a day, could be more. Pete and Samuel will be here and you'll be safe. But Natalie, I need to say something before I go, just in case." "In case what? Don't talk like that." "I need to say it anyway." He set down the saddle and took her hands in his. "I'm in love with you. I think I started falling that first day on the platform, and I haven't stopped. I know it's fast, and I know you might not feel the same way, but if something happens out there, I didn't want to have left without telling you." Tears pricked her eyes. "Nothing is going to happen. You're going to ride out there, help catch those rustlers, and come home safe. And when you do, I'll tell you that I love you too, because I do. I love you, Yates Ormond." His eyes widened, and then he was kissing her, urgent and sweet, and she kissed him back with all the emotion swelling in her chest. When they broke apart, he pressed his forehead to hers. "When I get back, we need to talk about the future," he said. "Our future." "Yes," she agreed. "Now go, before the sheriff leaves without you." She watched him ride away with the posse, her hand pressed to her lips where she could still feel the warmth of his kiss, and sent up a prayer to whatever gods watched over Cowboys that he would come back to her safe. The next 2 days were the longest of Natalie's life. She threw herself into work, scrubbing floors that didn't need scrubbing and cooking elaborate meals that no one had the appetite to eat. Margaret tried to reassure her, but Natalie could see the worry in the other woman's eyes too. Pete and Samuel took turns keeping watch at night, just in case the rustlers decided to target the Ormond ranch next. It was late afternoon on the second day when Natalie heard horses again. She ran outside, her heart in her throat, and nearly sobbed with relief when she saw Yates riding toward the house, dusty and tired but whole. She didn't care about propriety or what anyone might think. She ran to him, and he dismounted and caught her in his arms, holding her tight. "I'm all right," he murmured against her hair. "I'm all right, I'm here." "I was so worried," she said, her words muffled against his chest. "I couldn't stop thinking about all the terrible things that might happen. We caught them, all three of them, and we recovered most of the Morrison cattle. No one was badly hurt. It's over." She pulled back to look at him, taking in the exhaustion in his face, the shadow of beard on his jaw, the way his eyes softened when they met hers. "You need food and rest." "I need you," he said. "Everything else can wait." They went inside, and while Margaret fussed over her brother, insisting he eat something and tell them the whole story, Natalie prepared a plate for him and tried to calm her still racing heart. He kept looking at her while he talked, as if reassuring himself that she was real and still there, and every time their eyes met, she felt that pull between them, strong as a rope and twice as unbreakable. After he had eaten and washed the trail dust away, he found her on the porch, watching the stars come out. "I meant what I said before I left," he told her, sitting beside her on the steps. "I love you, Natalie. And I want you to stay here, not just as someone who works for us, but as part of this family. As my wife, if you'll have me." Her heart felt too big for her chest. "That's what you want, truly. More than anything I've ever wanted in my life. I know I don't have much to offer. The ranch does all right, but we're not rich. It's a hard life out here sometimes, and I can't promise luxury or ease. But I can promise that I'll love you every day for the rest of my life, that I'll work hard to build something good for us, that I'll never give you reason to regret saying yes." Natalie thought about the girl she had been stepping off that train just 6 weeks ago, lost and frightened and alone. That girl seemed like a stranger now. The woman she had become here, working alongside these good people, falling in love with this honest, kind man, she felt like her truest self. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I'll marry you." The smile that broke across Yates's face was radiant. He pulled her into his arms and kissed her deeply, and she kissed him back with joy bubbling up inside her like spring water. When they finally broke apart, both breathless and grinning, he said, "I don't have a ring yet. I'll get you one, something nice." "I don't need a ring to know this is real," she said, "but I wouldn't say no to one eventually." They told Margaret that evening, and she actually cried with happiness, hugging them both and saying she had known from the start that they were meant for each other. They decided to have a small wedding in town as soon as arrangements could be made, neither of them wanting to wait long now that they had committed to building a life together. The next few weeks passed in a blur of preparation. Mrs. Henderson helped Natalie find fabric for a new dress, cream-colored cotton with lace at the collar and cuffs, simple but lovely. The whole town seemed excited about the wedding, people offering congratulations whenever Natalie went into Las Animas with Yates or Margaret. It felt good to be part of a community, to have neighbors who cared and friends who celebrated with them. Yates did buy her a ring, a simple gold band with a small blue stone that matched her eyes. He presented it to her one evening on the porch, sliding it onto her finger and kissing her hand with such tenderness that she felt tears prick her eyes. "It's perfect," she told him. "Everything about this is perfect." The wedding took place on a Saturday in early October, the weather cooperating with clear skies and comfortable temperatures. They married in the same church where they had danced together that first time, with Margaret standing up with Natalie and Pete serving as Yates's best man. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt, and when the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Yates kissed her with a mixture of reverence and joy that made her feel cherished down to her bones. The town had organized a celebration afterward, with tables of food and more dancing and well wishes from everyone. Natalie danced with her new husband, with Pete and Samuel, with Sheriff Miller and a dozen other men from town, But it was always Yates she came back to, his hand finding hers, his eyes seeking her out across the room. They rode back to the ranch as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. Margaret had arranged to stay in town with her friend for the night, giving them privacy, and when they arrived at the ranch house, Yates lifted Natalie from the wagon and carried her over the threshold, both of them laughing. That night, in the room they would now share, they came together as husband and wife, learning each other with gentle hands and whispered words of love. It was tender and passionate, and everything Natalie had hoped for. And afterward, lying in Yates's arms with her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, she thought about how strange and wonderful life could be. 2 months ago, she had stepped off a train with nowhere to go, and now she had a home, a husband, a future full of promise. "What are you thinking about?" Yates asked, his fingers trailing through her hair. "How happy I am. How lucky I am that you were on that platform that day." "I'm the lucky one," he said. "You could have kept going to the next town or the one after that, but you stayed here. You stayed with me." "I belong here with you," she said, echoing his words from that first day, and felt him smile against her temple. The months that followed were perhaps the happiest of Natalie's life. She threw herself into making the ranch house a true home, sewing curtains for the windows and braiding rag rugs for the floors. She expanded her garden, planting vegetables that would see them through the winter, and learned to preserve food the way Margaret taught her. She proved herself capable with the horses, too, and Yates taught her to ride, patient and encouraging as she gained confidence. Margaret's health continued to improve through the fall and into winter. Having less responsibility seemed to agree with her, and having her brother settled and happy clearly eased something in her own heart. She and Natalie became genuine friends, not just sisters through marriage, and many evenings were spent with the three of them around the fire, talking or reading or just enjoying the comfortable silence of family. Winter in Colorado was harsher than anything Natalie had experienced in Philadelphia. Snow piled high around the ranch buildings, and temperatures dropped so low that ice formed on the inside of the windows. But the ranch house stayed warm, the stove burning constantly, and there was something cozy about being snowed in together, the outside world held at bay by white drifts and howling wind. Yates was attentive and loving, never taking her for granted, always making sure she knew how much he valued her. He would come in from working in the cold and seek her out immediately, kissing her hello and holding her close until he warmed up. He told her about his day, asked about hers, valued her opinions on ranch decisions. They talked about everything, building the kind of deep partnership Natalie had always hoped for but never quite believed she would find. It was in January, 3 months after their wedding, that Natalie realized her monthly courses were late. She waited another week to be sure, her heart pounding with hope and fear in equal measure, before she told Margaret her suspicions. "Oh, honey, that's wonderful," Margaret said, hugging her tight. "A baby. Yates will be over the moon. You think so? We haven't really talked about children yet. What if it's too soon?" "It's never too soon for love to create more love. Trust me, he's going to be thrilled." Natalie waited until that evening when she and Yates were alone in their room to tell him. She was nervous, uncertain how he would react, but she needn't have worried. "You're sure?" he asked, his hands cupping her face, his eyes searching hers. "Not completely sure yet, but I think so." "How do you feel about it?" "How do I feel?" he laughed, the sound full of wonder. "I feel like the luckiest man alive. A baby, our baby. Natalie, this is incredible." He kissed her deeply, then dropped to his knees and pressed his face to her still flat stomach, his arms wrapping around her waist. She ran her fingers through his hair, her own eyes filling with tears at the tenderness of the gesture. As winter gave way to spring, and her pregnancy became more obvious, Yates became almost comically protective. He wouldn't let her lift anything heavy, insisted she rest more, worried constantly that she was working too hard. It was sweet if occasionally annoying, and Natalie had to remind him more than once that pregnant women had been managing farms and ranches since the beginning of time, and she was perfectly capable of doing her share of the work. "I know," he would say. "I just can't help worrying. You and this baby are everything to me." Margaret was excited about becoming an aunt and spent time knitting tiny clothes and blankets. Mrs. Henderson gave Natalie advice about what to expect, and several other women in town who had children of their own shared their experiences and offered support. The community embraced Natalie fully now, not as the outsider who had arrived on a train with nowhere to go, but as one of their own, a woman building a life and family among them. The baby came in late August, on a hot day when the mountains shimmered in the distance and cicadas droned in the cottonwood trees. The labor was long and difficult, attended by the town's midwife and Margaret, with Yates pacing holes in the porch outside, until Pete finally made him go work with the horses to burn off his nervous energy. But when it was over and Natalie held her son for the first time, all the pain faded into insignificance. He was perfect, with dark hair like his father and a tiny face that seemed to hold the promise of the whole world. Yates came in when Margaret called him, and the look on his face when he saw his son was something Natalie would treasure forever. He sat carefully on the bed beside her, reaching out a tentative finger to touch the baby's impossibly small hand, and when those tiny fingers curled around his, tears spilled down his cheeks. "He's so small," Yates whispered. "So perfect. What should we call him?" They had discussed names but never quite decided. Now, looking at her husband's awestruck face and the precious life they had created together, Natalie said, "What about James after your father, James Ormond?" Yates said, testing out the name. "I like it. James it is." The first few months with a newborn were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. James was a good baby, generally content unless he was hungry or needed changing, but the round-the-clock care still left Natalie more tired than she had ever been. Yates helped as much as he could, walking the floor with James late at night, changing diapers without complaint, looking at his son with such obvious love that it made Natalie fall in love with him all over again. Margaret doted on her nephew, and even gruff Pete and Samuel turned soft when they looked at the baby. The ranch felt more alive somehow with a child in it, full of new hope and possibility. As James grew, Natalie watched Yates become the father she had always hoped he would be, patient and gentle and endlessly devoted. He would take the baby with him sometimes on short trips around the ranch, James secured in a carrier Yates had fashioned himself, talking to his son about the cattle and horses as if the infant could understand every word. "I want him to love this place the way I do," Yates told her. "I want him to know that this land, this life we've built, it all matters. It all means something." "He'll know," Natalie assured him. "How could he not, with you as his father?" The seasons turned, James grew, and life settled into new rhythms. When James was a year old, Margaret announced that she was engaged to a merchant from town, a widower named Thomas who had been courting her since spring. They married that fall in a quiet ceremony, and Thomas moved into the ranch house with them, adding his own business acumen to the ranch's operations. He was a good man, kind to Margaret and helpful with the ranch, and Natalie was glad to see her sister-in-law so happy. With Thomas helping Yates with the ranch work and Margaret's health fully restored, they all settled into a comfortable life together. The ranch prospered, and Yates was able to expand their cattle operation like he had always planned. They built a new barn and repaired the bunkhouse, hired another ranch hand to help Pete and Samuel, invested in better breeding stock for both cattle and horses. When James was 2, Natalie discovered she was pregnant again. This time the news was less of a surprise but no less joyous. Yates swept her into his arms and spun her around, making her laugh and scold him at the same time for being too exuberant. Their daughter arrived the following spring, during a late snowstorm that blanketed the ranch in white. They named her Caroline, after Natalie's mother, and she had Natalie's blonde hair and Yates's green eyes, a beautiful combination that made everyone who saw her smile. James was fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to help with everything and constantly asking to hold her. Watching her children together, watching Yates with both of them, Natalie felt a contentment so deep it sometimes took her breath away. Happy. Yates asked her one evening when the children were asleep, and they were sitting on the porch watching the sunset, something they still did as often as possible. "More than I ever imagined I could be," she told him honestly. "Sometimes I think about that girl who got off the train 4 years ago, so scared and lost. I wish I could tell her that everything was going to be all right, better than all right. You know what I think about?" Yates pulled her closer against his side. "I think about what my life would have been like if I hadn't been at that station that day, if I had gone home a different way or been too busy to notice you. I don't like thinking about it because it would have been such an empty life without you in it. But you were there. You did notice me. You told me I belonged here with you, and you were right." "Best thing I ever said," he agreed, kissing her temple. The years continued their steady march forward. James grew into a bright, energetic boy who loved the ranch and showed every sign of inheriting his father's way with horses. Caroline was quieter, more thoughtful, but with a stubborn streak that made Natalie laugh because she recognized herself in it. Margaret and Thomas had a daughter of their own, little Sarah, and the 3 cousins were inseparable, running wild around the ranch during the day and collapsing into exhausted sleep at night. The ranch continued to thrive under Yates's careful management and Thomas's business sense. They weathered droughts and hard winters, market fluctuations and the occasional trouble with rustlers or predators, but always came through it together, as a family. Pete and Samuel eventually retired, though they stayed on the ranch in a cabin Yates built for them, unwilling to leave the only home they had known for so long. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Yates took Natalie back into Las Animas for a dance, just like that first one they had attended together. The town had grown in the intervening years, new businesses opening, more families settling in the area, but the church hall was the same, and the music was just as lively. They danced together, older now and marked by the years in ways both visible and not, but still as in love as they had been at the beginning. Maybe more so, because now they had weathered life together, faced challenges and overcome them, built something real and lasting. "You ever regret it?" Natalie asked as they swayed to a waltz. "Marrying someone you barely knew, taking on a responsibility you hadn't planned for." Yates looked at her as if she had asked the most ridiculous question in the world. "Not for one single second. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Natalie. You and our children and the life we've made together. If I could go back and do it all again, I wouldn't change a thing." "Me either," she said. "I love you, Yates Ormond, more now than the day I married you, if that's possible." "It's possible," he assured her, "because I feel the same way." As they continued to dance, Natalie thought about the journey that had brought her here. The fear and grief that had driven her west, the desperation she had felt standing on that train platform, the miracle of this kind cowboy who had seen her struggling and offered help without expectation of anything in return. Life had a way of working out sometimes, she thought. Not always, and not for everyone, but for her and Yates, the pieces had fallen into place in a way that felt almost magical. The years marched on. James grew tall and capable, taking on more responsibility at the ranch and showing the same integrity and work ethic his father modeled. Caroline proved to have a gift with numbers and began helping Thomas with the ranch's books and business dealings. Little Sarah was the wild one, always getting into trouble and making them all laugh with her antics. Margaret's health remained good, and she and Thomas were happy together, their partnership a strong one. The ranch became a place of warmth and welcome, known throughout the area for the Ormonds' hospitality and fair dealing. They employed several families now, and the operation had grown beyond what Yates's parents could have imagined. Through it all, Natalie and Yates remained the center of it all, their love the foundation on which everything else was built. They had disagreements, of course, moments of frustration or misunderstanding, but they had learned early how to talk through problems, how to forgive and move forward. They made it a point to never go to bed angry, to always say, "I love you," before parting, to remember that they were on the same team facing the world together. When James turned 18, a young woman from town caught his eye, and Natalie watched her son fall in love with the same headlong certainty his father had shown. The girl, Emma, was sweet and hardworking, and when James asked his father's permission to propose, Yates gave it gladly. They married the following spring in a ceremony that reminded Natalie of her own wedding, simple and full of joy and promise. James and Emma built a house on the far side of the ranch property, and within a year, they had made Natalie and Yates grandparents with the birth of a baby boy. Holding her grandson for the first time, Natalie marveled at how life continued its beautiful cycle, love creating more love, family growing and expanding. Caroline chose a different path, announcing at 19 that she wanted to go to Denver to study accounting formally, to learn everything she could about business and finance. It was bittersweet watching their daughter leave, but Natalie and Yates supported her decision, proud of her ambition and intelligence. She would come home for visits, full of stories about the city and her studies, and eventually she met a young lawyer named David who treated her with respect and affection. They married in Denver, and while Caroline made her home there, she remained closely involved with the ranch's business operations, her expertise invaluable as the operation continued to grow. Sarah stayed close to home, taking over much of Margaret's old responsibilities and proving to be a gifted cook and gardener. She married one of the ranch hands, a good man named Henry, and they built their life there on the ranch, adding their own children to the growing family tree. As Natalie and Yates moved into their 40s and then their 50s, they watched their family flourish around them. The ranch that had once struggled to support just Yates and Margaret now sustained dozens of people, and the name Ormond was respected throughout southeastern Colorado. Through it all, Natalie never forgot where she had come from or the circumstances that had brought her to this life. When new people came to town looking lost or desperate, she was always the first to offer help, remembering her own terror and confusion that day on the platform. Several young women found their way to the ranch over the years, given work and support until they could establish themselves. And Natalie took quiet satisfaction in being able to pay forward the kindness Yates had shown her so long ago. On their 25th wedding anniversary, their children and grandchildren organized a celebration at the ranch, with neighbors and friends coming from miles around. There was food and music and dancing, speeches and toasts, and Natalie felt overwhelmed by the evidence of the life they had built together. That evening, after everyone had left or gone to bed, she and Yates took their familiar spot on the porch, looking out over land that had been in his family for decades and would be there for generations to come. 25 years, Yates said, shaking his head. Sometimes it feels like yesterday that I saw you on that platform. Other times, I can barely remember what life was like before you. I don't want to remember life before you, Natalie said. These 25 years with you have been the only ones that really mattered. Everything before was just waiting for this for you, for the life we built together. I told you that first day that you belonged here with me, Yates reminded her. I think I knew it even then before I understood what it meant. You were always meant to be here, Natalie. This was always meant to be our story. She leaned against him, his arm coming around her shoulders in a gesture so familiar it was like breathing. Best story I could have asked for, she agreed. As they sat there in the gathering darkness, listening to the familiar sounds of the ranch settling in for the night, Natalie thought about the girl she had been stepping off that train in Las Animas, Colorado, in 1882. That girl had been scared and alone, facing an uncertain future with no money, no family, no prospects. But she had also been brave, Natalie realized now. Brave enough to get on that train in the first place, brave enough to accept help from a stranger, brave enough to open her heart to love even when she had every reason to protect it. And that bravery had brought her here to this life, to this man, to this family and home. It had brought her to exactly where she was always meant to be. The years continued to pass, gentle in their progression now. Yates's hair turned more silver than dark, and Natalie found gray in her own blonde locks, but they wore their age as badges of honor, proof of a life well lived. They slowed down, letting their children and grandchildren take on more of the ranch work, content to advise and support rather than lead the charge. Margaret passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 68, and they mourned her deeply, grateful for the years they had been given, and for the way she had welcomed Natalie into the family from the very beginning. Thomas followed her 3 years later, and they buried him beside his beloved wife on the hill overlooking the ranch. Pete died in his sleep one winter, Samuel following him 6 months later, and with their passing went some of the ranch's living history. But their legacy lived on in the stories told around the dinner table, in the methods they had taught for working cattle and horses, in the values of hard work and integrity they had modeled. When Natalie and Yates reached their 60th birthdays within months of each other, their family threw a joint celebration, and Natalie stood looking around at the crowd of people gathered. Their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, the friends and neighbors who had become like family, the legacy of love that she and Yates had created together. "What are you thinking?" Yates asked, coming to stand beside her. "I'm thinking about how lucky I am, how blessed. That day I stepped off the train in Las Animas, I thought my life was over. I couldn't imagine a future. And look at this, look at what we made together. It's more than I ever dreamed possible." Yates took her hand, his touch still capable of sending warmth through her after all these years. "You gave me this," he said. "You brought love and life and purpose to a ranch that was just existing before you came. You made it a home, made me complete. Every good thing in my life traces back to you. We did it together," Natalie insisted. "Everything good came from both of us, from the partnership we built, the love we shared. I couldn't have done any of this without you, Yates." "Partners," he agreed, raising her hand to his lips and kissing it gently. From that first day to this one and all the days still to come. They both knew there were more days behind them now than ahead, but neither dwelt on that. They focused instead on making the most of the time they had, cherishing each sunrise over the mountains, each meal shared with family, each quiet evening on the porch watching the stars come out over Colorado's endless sky. Their children and grandchildren visited often, and the ranch house was filled with laughter and life. James had taken over running the ranch completely now, managing it with the same care and skill his father had shown, while Caroline's business acumen had helped them weather economic downturns and expand into new ventures. Sarah's children were growing up on the ranch the way their ancestors had, learning the land and the work, carrying forward traditions that stretched back generations. When Natalie was 72 and Yates 74, they celebrated their 48th wedding anniversary quietly, just the two of them taking a picnic out to a spot near a creek that ran through the property. It was late spring, and wildflowers carpeted the meadow in brilliant colors, and the mountains stood majestic in the distance the way they had for millions of years, and would for millions more. 48 years, Natalie marveled. More than twice as long as I had lived before I met you. You've been the majority of my life, Yates. The best part of your life, I hope, he said with a smile, the very best. No question about that. They sat in comfortable silence, eating the lunch Sarah had packed for them, watching the creek flow past and listening to birds call from the cottonwood trees. After all these years, they didn't always need words. Sometimes just being together was enough. "Do you remember what I said to you that first day?" Yates asked eventually. "You said a lot of things that first day. I told you that you belonged here with me. I was so forward, saying something like that to a woman I had just met. I've thought about it over the years, worried that maybe I was too presumptuous, that I put you in an uncomfortable position." Natalie reached over and took his hand. "You gave me hope when I had none. You offered me a place when I had nowhere to go. You spoke words I desperately needed to hear." "It wasn't presumptuous, Yates. It was perfect. You were perfect. Not perfect, but perfect for you, I hope." "Perfect for me," she confirmed. "In every way that matters." As the sun began to sink lower, they packed up their picnic and rode slowly back to the ranch house. Their pace was slower now, their bodies not as strong as they once were, but their spirits were still vibrant, still engaged with life and love and the beautiful world around them. That evening, surrounded by family at dinner, Natalie looked around the table and felt such profound gratitude it almost overwhelmed her. Every person here existed because she had gotten on a train in Philadelphia all those years ago, because Yates had been kind to a stranger, because they had taken a chance on love. The ripples of that one moment had spread out to create all of this, a whole network of lives and love and connection. Later, in the bedroom they had shared for nearly half a century, Yates held her close as they prepared for sleep. "I love you, Natalie Ormond," he said, as he did every night. "More than words can say." "I love you too," she replied, as she always did. "Today, tomorrow, and forever." The years were kind to them. They aged gracefully, their minds sharp even as their bodies slowed. They spent their days surrounded by family, tending to small tasks around the ranch, sharing stories of the old days with grandchildren and great-grandchildren who listened with rapt attention. On a warm September evening, when Natalie was 75 and Yates 77, they sat on their beloved porch watching another sunset paint the mountains in shades of amber and rose. James had taken over the ranch completely now, and they were free to simply enjoy their remaining time together without the weight of responsibility. "Beautiful evening," Yates commented, his hand finding hers automatically. "They all are," Natalie said. "When I'm with you, they all are." He turned to look at her, and she saw everything she needed to see in his eyes. Love, devotion, gratitude, joy. The same things she felt reflected back at her. No regrets, he asked, a question he had asked periodically over the years. Not a single one. You. Only that I didn't have more time with you. 1,000 years wouldn't be enough. Then we'll have to make the most of what we have, she said practically. And we have. We've made a beautiful life, Yates. We've loved well and been loved in return. We've built something that will last long after we're gone. That's more than most people get. Thanks to you, he said. All thanks to you. Thanks to us, she corrected gently. Always us together. As darkness fell and stars began to emerge overhead, they remained there. Two people who had found each other against all odds and built something extraordinary from that chance meeting. Their love story would be told and retold in their family for generations. The tale of the kind cowboy who had seen a lost woman on a train platform and known immediately that she was meant to be his, and the brave woman who had been willing to trust in that kindness and build a life in a strange new place. They lived several more good years, watching their family continue to grow and flourish, seeing the ranch prosper under James's capable leadership, taking joy in each new day they were granted together. When Yates passed peacefully in his sleep at the age of 81, with Natalie holding his hand and their children gathered around his bed, his last words were ones of love for his wife and gratitude for the life they had shared. Natalie grieved deeply, but not hopelessly. She had had 54 years with the love of her life, and their love had created a legacy that would endure. She spent her remaining years surrounded by family, sharing stories and wisdom, making sure everyone understood how precious love was and how important it was to take chances, to be brave, to trust in the possibility of happiness, even when circumstances seemed dire. She passed away 3 years after Yates, at the age of 84, in the ranch house where she had lived for more than half a century. Her last conscious thoughts were of that day on the train platform in Las Animas, of the kind cowboy who had changed her entire life with a few simple words, of the beautiful journey they had traveled together from that moment forward. They buried her beside Yates on the hill overlooking the ranch, and their descendants gathered to celebrate 2 lives well lived and a love story for the ages. The ranch continued under family ownership, passing down through the generations, a testament to what could be built when 2 people found each other and committed to building something lasting together. And on quiet evenings when the sun set over the Colorado mountains, turning the sky to gold and crimson, it was said you could sometimes see 2 figures sitting on the porch of the old ranch house, hand in hand, watching the stars come out together the way they always had, their love transcending even death itself, eternal as the mountains and endless as the sky. The story of Natalie Peterson and Yates Ormond became legend in Las Animas and the surrounding area, told and retold as an example of how life could surprise you, how kindness could change everything, how love could flourish in the most unexpected circumstances. Their descendants carried their names and their values forward, and the ranch they had built together stood as a monument to what they had created from a single moment of compassion on a train platform in 1882. It was a love story worthy of the Wild West that had shaped it, full of courage and hope, and the unshakable belief that 2 people who were meant to be together would find their way to each other, no matter how impossible the odds might seem. And in the end, that was the greatest legacy Natalie and Yates left behind. Not just the land or the family or the successful ranch, but the proof that love, real and true and deep, was always worth taking a chance on, always worth fighting for, always worth believing in. Their story ended not with sadness but with fulfillment. 2 lives completed in partnership, 2 hearts that had beaten as one from that first day to their last, Two souls who had found in each other everything they had been searching for, and more than they had ever dreamed possible. And if you visited Las Animas, Colorado, and asked about the old Ormond Ranch, someone would surely tell you the story of how it all began, with a woman stepping off a train with nowhere to go, and a kind cowboy who whispered the words that changed both their lives forever. "You belong here with me."